Powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios. It's Football at 4.
This is Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast and brought to you by PropSwap, where America buys and sells sports bets. Go to PropSwap.com, download the PropSwap app today. Andrew DiCecco is here as we take a look at some of the news and notes. There's a couple big injury things at Eagles camp today. We'll have that day 10 in the books at Eagles camp, and Andrew DiCecco is here to kind of give us some thoughts and observations on everything that he's hearing and seeing at Eagles camp. But I guess, Andrew, I do want to start with the news that just came out of New Orleans, where Patrick Robinson announced his retirement today. And I'll just ask you, if I say Patrick Robinson, there's only one thing that can come to mind, correct?
Yeah, the interception against the Vikings that he returned for a touchdown.
It is
one of the ties to that game.
It is one of the greatest moments ever, right? I mean, it is one of the most memorable moments in the history of the franchise. Like him stepping in front, and then the return. I mean, he takes it from the left hash to the right, up the sideline. He gets the block. I don't think people remember the noise in that stadium when Patrick Robinson, and I kind of liken it to when Matt Stairs hit that home run against the Dodgers. It's like one of the more nondescript players with one of the biggest. Like if I said to someone, "Hey, remember Patrick Robinson?" They'd be like, "Who?" But the fact that he made that interception, you can never forget that guy.
Yeah, he's forever part of Eagles history, and that play right there turned the tide of that game. You know, remember it didn't start out too well. I believe Najee Good was beat for a touchdown, but I think it was Kyle Rudolph, and you started to get that feeling like, here we go again. But you know what? That interception changed everything.
Yeah, it sure did. The Eagles went on to win. That game, remember, that game was 7-0, and the Vikings had the ball. He takes that back to the house. It's then 7-7, and then they just absolutely took over from there. They win 38-7. By the way, it was Ronald Darby who was trying to block. Now, he didn't really block.
He got lit up.
Yeah, he got lit up on the play, but it was enough to spring Robinson. And, man, I remember that play vividly, where I was, what was going on, and after that, it was a euphoric moment as the Eagles went to the Super Bowl. Well, Andrew, they're trying to work their way back there with the new team. Let's take a look at some of the things that are happening. One, I guess the left tackle spot is now officially going to be Mailata because the team is going to be without Andre Dillard with a knee injury.
Yeah, if there was ever any doubt, the competition is over, and Jordan Mailata has won the battle, so to speak. I mean, it was never really a battle to begin with, Mike. It was they alternated the two players throughout practice. They gave each looks with the first team, and Jordan Mailata was just so far ahead in that race and so dominant and taking advantage of just his athletic traits and his size and just bullying defensive ends, and you just have to love his upside, whereas Andre Dillard never really took the next step in his progression. You know, he only had 16 games under his belt, and he had a whole offseason to sort of find his footing and get stronger, and he said all the right things in the offseason, but it never really transpired onto the football field. He still struggled to anchor. His play strength was always in question, and he struggled with against Derek Barnett and Josh Sweat. And, you know, he was one of the players I was really looking forward to seeing in the preseason to see if he was a guy that really just needed the reps to sort of turn the corner. But now we won't be afforded that opportunity.
Yeah, so Dillard is week to week now with a knee injury. He's out. Also week to week with a knee injury is Kayvon Wallace. This is possibly a bigger injury for the team because he was on the depth chart at the number one spot. We know McLeod is kind of cloudy on what his future this season will be, whether he'll be ready for the start of the season or not. But how big is losing Wallace?
Right, yeah, and by all accounts, Rodney McLeod expects to play week one, and I sort of envision Kayvon Wallace as playing the Corey Graham role from 2017 as that third safety and, you know, a very prominent role player. But when you look at Kayvon Wallace, he really needed these reps. Both him and a player like Davion Taylor really could have benefited from these preseason reps that are so valuable. They didn't have the preseason last year as rookies. So when I looked at Kayvon Wallace and who he was going up against, he was vying for that third spot with Marcus Epps. When you look at what they both players were able to accomplish last season, Marcus Epps played 364 snaps, which was about 33% of the defensive total, and Kayvon Wallace, in a banged-up secondary, was only able to accumulate 202 snaps, which was roughly 18% of the defensive total. When you look at that, you really wanted to see what he was able to do with a full offseason and if he was able to take the reins and and really put his stamp on that third spot. And now the next man up is going to be Marcus Epps, also a guy like Elijah Riley, and a veteran like Andrew Adams, who has played in 73 games, 32 of them being starts. As a veteran player, he also is going to be the beneficiary of an increased reps situation.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to see what happens at that safety spot now, because Harris and McLeod are two good ones. A lot of young players behind them, as you just kind of chronicled there, Andrew. So obviously some interesting stuff today at practice. By the way, 11 day. This is the 11th day, day 11 in the books for the Eagles. Nick Sirianni he didn't name Jalen Hurts his starter just yet, but he did admit that he will play on Thursday night and he will go with the starters. So what do we anticipate seeing from Jalen Hurts? How much? And do you think they'll give him an opportunity to kind of show what he can do, or do they scale it back for him?
Well, it's certainly the right move to give Jalen some reps. He's another player along the lines of, I mentioned Davion Taylor and Kayvon Wallace. Well, Jalen Hurts is another player that's going to be really, he needs to get these game reps. And I don't know that you're going to see a lot of Jalen, but I think that what you're going to see is very vanilla. They're not going to tip their hand. Nick Sirianni and his staff isn't really going to tip their hand much as far as what the offense is going to look like, some of the designs that they have for Jalen. But you're going to see him get out there, maybe take a hit or two, and deliver the football, to get a feel for his pass catchers. And then if I were the Eagles, I would get him out of the game and turn the reins over to Joe Flacco and Nick Mullins, because Jalen's your guy moving forward, whether or not they're readily going to admit it right now or not. And barring something unforeseen the next couple of weeks here, and why expose him to injury if you don't have to?
Yeah, and I know that the interesting part would be, later on, they only have 3 quarterbacks in camp. I mean, how much game time are you going to give to Flacco in a preseason game? So are we anticipating seeing a lot of Nick Mullins, or does that just mean, we're going to let Hurts get some reps in these preseason games?
No, I think you're going to see a lot of Nick Mullins over these next 3 games. And he's a player that, a lot of times when you see a lot of these young quarterbacks in the preseason, the wide receivers are really at a disadvantage because these young quarterbacks aren't able to find wide open guys. The game's moving very fast for them, and they're not able to go through their progressions. But Nick Mullins is a guy who's won games in the NFL, and he's going to be playing with guys like Quez Watkins and John Hightower and some of those depth guys that are really going to need to put their best foot forward, so to speak, in the preseason. And now you're going to have a capable quarterback delivering the football. And I think it's going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot more watchable than it has been in past years.
Yeah, and we see the depth chart is out today. Devonta Smith is the leader there. He's obviously not going to play, which means Travis Fulgham, John Hightower going to get some reps there. Greg Ward is listed as the slot guy. J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is listed as the backup slot. Rieger Watkins. I would imagine that all eyes are going to be on, I guess, Watkins. Is he the receiver that you're interested to see the most on Thursday night, or is there another guy in that crew that you want to see something from?
Watkins, I would like to see how they're going to use him, because he's such a dynamic player that you almost want to see, do they have a specific package for him? He's so improved as a route runner, and he has just natural hands. But I've seen a lot of highlights from him, and I saw him in person last week when I was there. But John Hightower, to me, is a player that I really want to see, because he's never had a problem getting open. He's a very crafty route runner, very quick and out of his release. But tracking the football has always been an adventure with him, right? I mean, he was thrust into the lineup early, looked like he was overwhelmed a little bit last season, but he was able to get open, which is one of the hardest things that you can ask for a young receiver. But now you want to see, can he put it all together and become a more complete player, which has yet to be seen. But, I mean, he's going to have every opportunity to do so.
Are you at the point where you have given up on Arcega-Whiteside, or do you want to see him? Are you going to be, somebody you're going to be keeping an eye on Thursday night, or are you kind of past, waiting for him?
Well, I don't know how much you're going to be able to gauge from the group, the offensive group that J.J. is going to be out there playing with. I mean, being a former second-round pick, he's supposed to go out there and dominate secondaries with Nick Mullins and company. Based on where he sits on the depth chart, he's not really going to be playing against top-tier starting caliber players, I should say. So it's going to have to be it would be more alarming if he's not producing. He's also going to need to show that he can step up and place and deliver on special teams, because when you're looking at that final roster spot and you're trying to encourage the Eagles or tip, make them want to keep 6 players. I mean, you got to show that you can contribute on the third, in the third phase if you want to stick.
Yep, that's those wide receivers are going to be very interesting throughout this camp with no Devonta Smith. Obviously, that gives a lot of these guys a chance to kind of prove their worth out there. Obviously, we kind of touched on the left tackle position. We think that's really closed, sealed right now, and we thought Mailata was going to win it. But what about the way they use the tight ends? Do you think we'll get any clue as to what they're going to do? They are both listed as starters on the depth chart.
Yeah, I'm not sure that you're going to see much of anything from Goddard or Hurts. And one way or the other, you're not going to have any idea of how they're going to be deployed, any specific roles for these guys. I think it's going to be kind of cut and dry. Zach Ertz, if he's on the roster, and right now he is, he's going to be that short to intermediate guy that's going to move the chains, good route runner, durable, but he's not going to break the big one, right? He's not going to break tackles and create that yak after the, when he's on the move and everything. But I think with Dallas Goedert, he's going to be the more explosive of the 2 players, the better blocker. He's going to threaten teams vertically. He's going to break tackles. He's going to be more of the red zone presence. But I think you're going to see a lot of guys like a Richard Rodgers and a Tyree Jackson and Jack Stoll see a majority of the reps on Thursday.
Obviously, the running back game, too. We're all kind of interested in that. I know that's something that you're going to have your eye on with Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott and how they use Howard and Kerryon Johnson. But how many running backs do you anticipate making this roster, and what are you looking at that group for Thursday night?
Well, honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they keep 5. And I'm going to have a more detailed observation and as far as the players that I'm going to be watching tomorrow morning when it comes on InsideTheBirds.com. But, I mean, I could very easily see them keeping 5 because I think they're going to all have these certain roles that they're going to be slotted in. You're going to have your early down runner and your primary running back in Miles Sanders, but you're also going to have specialist type of runners like a Jordan Howard who can be that short yardage guy. Not going to break a home run or anything like that, but he's going to be able to grind out those tough yards and maybe run the clock out. Then you're going to have a Kerryon Johnson. They're sort of vying for the same role there, I would say. And then you have the change-up guys in Boston Scott and Kenneth Gainwell. And you have Jason Huntley, who's really impressed me a little bit with his burst and explosiveness, which is what allured the Eagles to kind of snag him off waivers before the season started last year. He's another guy that can contribute as a kick returner on special teams. So he has a little bit of a dual purpose there. So we'll see how that goes. I'm really interested to see him in the preseason games.
Yeah, me too. But I'm also very interested, Andrew, looking at just Nick Sirianni and the way, the pace of the offense and what he looks like and how he, this is the first time he's really going to be a play caller. So we're going to get that opportunity to see what kind of tempo, pace that they kind of roll with here.
Yeah, and again, I'm not even sure how much you're going to be able to take away from this. I think that it's all new for everyone, and I don't know that they're going to tip their hand one way or the other from a gamesmanship perspective. It'll be good for Nick Sirianni to get his first game under his belt, and a lot of the young players to get that experience and get those much needed reps against someone that's not your teammate. And then most importantly, emerge from the preseason healthy.
All right, defensive side of the ball. Let's take a look over there because obviously Sirianni is the head coach, and he doesn't get asked a lot of defensive questions during these pressers that he did get a chance to talk today. But that being said, we talked about Kayvon Wallace. The secondary is going to be interesting because Nelson and Slay, you got those two. What else do we expect to see with the rest of the secondary out there? Who are some guys on Thursday night for fans to keep an eye on? Some of the younger, unheralded guys that I guess are battling for playing time, but roster spots.
Well, you're going to want to keep an eye on Josiah Scott, the nickel corner who was acquired from the Jacksonville Jaguars, former 4th-round pick. He's someone that has some upside there. I can very easily see them keeping him on as a backup nickel corner to Avonte Maddox, where you can use Avonte Maddox in a number of ways as a positionless type defender. You can play some safety and play some and give teams different types of looks. So I think having a guy like Josiah Scott would have a lot of value. Would add a lot of value to the position. Craig James is someone who's a really strong special teams player, one of the better gunners in football. The Eagles really like him. He can play outside and he can play inside. And of course, Zach McPherson's been one of the stars of training camp. We want to see what he can do if he's going to be able to carry that momentum over into the games. very tough physical player, very high football IQ, and he's one of the players that I'm most excited to see in game action.
I thought the unofficial depth chart was interesting because it lists Jannard Avery as a starter at the Sam spot.
Mm-hmm.
But how much playing time does that guy get, and what kind of role does that guy have?
Yeah, I'm not sure how often you're going to see Jannard Avery in coverage. I don't know that that's necessarily his forte. I think he's going to be if he makes the team, that is, he's going to be a rotational player coming in off the edge, much like a Joe Ostman. Again, these are guys that are on the roster fringe. The Eagles are going to be primarily a 2-linebacker team, and by all accounts, that's going to be Alex Singleton and Eric Wilson. And we'll see what happens, because you also have guys like T.J. Edwards and Sean Bradley that are there. Obviously, guys like Jacoby Stevens and Davion Taylor are sidelined, so they're not going to be factored into the equation. But I think by default, Jannard Avery becomes the next guy up. But I wouldn't read too much into it. I don't know how well he's going to be able to hold up in space. I think he's going to be more of an edge rusher, kind of coming off the edge there. So yeah, we'll see how that goes.
Because all three of the guys at the Sam spot were kind of those hybrid guys, right? Ostman was the other one. I think who was the third one? Was Tyron Jackson, the draft pick. So, Patrick Johnson. Right. So all three of those guys are kind of like hybrid ends. So it feels like if they're on the field, they're probably out there for one reason.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's going to look vastly different when you have guys like Davion Taylor back in the lineup. And Jacoby Stevens, I do believe, is going to make the roster. Obviously, he's missing some valuable time, as I outlined, but I think he can provide a lot from a special team standpoint. He's also a developmental player that I don't know if you want to expose him to waivers, because another team might look at his upside and be willing to be able to wait for him to sort of develop at the back end of the roster. So I don't know. He's someone that I think you should stash at the back end of your roster if you have the room. So I think it's going to look a lot different. But right now, with the limited amount of resources, I think Jannard Avery's the next guy up for that Sam spot.
Yep, and you got Brandon Graham, Ryan Kerrigan back up there. It'll be interesting because a lot of these guys, Andrew, are veterans on the defensive line anyway. Like how are they going to utilize the defensive ends? We got Brandon Graham, Ryan Kerrigan, you got Barnett and Sweat. You got a lot of young guys, a lot of older guys, and not a lot of depth behind them. So it's going to be interesting to see how he utilizes this depth chart throughout these preseason games.
Yeah, I think someone like Teron Jackson from Coastal Carolina is going to see a lot of reps. I don't know that you need to put Ryan Kerrigan out there or Josh Sweat out there, Derek Barnett out there, and give them such an extended look and expose them to potential injury. I think someone like Teron Jackson, who really is trying to make a case for them to keep 5 defensive ends, really needs to go out there and take all the reps that he can handle. And you're going to see Milton Williams out there a lot, who can also play some defensive end along with his defensive tackle spot. Hassan Ridgeway, and a number of the other young defensive tackles, Raekwon Williams. You're going to see a lot of those guys because the top 4 defensive ends are really etched in stone already. The top 2 defensive tackles are as well. So you're going to see a lot of Marlon. You're going to see a lot of Milton Williams. You're going to see a lot of Teron Jackson, I would assume.
Yeah, and you just kind of mentioned some of these younger players. Milton Williams, 3rd-round pick. I hope we get a chance to get to see a lot of him. And obviously there is some intrigue on Thursday night on what those guys might look like. Teron Jackson, as you said, Patrick Johnson. And one other, Davion Taylor, unfortunately, will not get a chance to get out there with the injury situation. So it's unfortunate because he would have been a nice guy to see get some extra snaps here. But I guess Jacoby Stevens would get more there, Sean Bradley. So it should be a fun night. Thursday night, the Eagles are back. You can hear the game right here on 97.3 ESPN. Andrew just broke down some of the guys he's keeping an eye on. We'll do more tomorrow with Jeff Mosher for Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. And, of course, Eagles football is back Thursday night. Andrew, quick 20 minutes, man. It goes quick.
It always does, man. Have a good one.
All right, man. Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4 from the Inside the Birds podcast at InsideTheBirds.com here on the Sports Bash.